Гепаргін – джерело амінокислот для відновлення сил та енергії.
Madam Ambassador, thank you for joining us today. Recently you gave your credentials to President Zelensky. Congratulations in Ukraine.
Thank you very much.
It would be fair enough to say that you came to the country with one of the most difficult and dangerous situations in the world. How do you feel about that? Were you afraid to go there? Have you experienced any air sirens or bombings?
Well, first it's an incredible honor to be the European Union ambassador to Ukraine. I have been coming here for the last 9 years, have been working with Ukraine since 2015, and to be here as the EU ambassador is really an immense honor. And yes, of course, I was scared. My family was scared, my son was scared and is scared. And the first 2 nights, in fact, in the first 2 nights we had 3 times that we had to go to the shelter. Especially the second night last week was at the beginning a little terrifying, but I see I see Kyivляне go about their lives and live here, so I think we just adjust.
Did your relatives ask you about rethinking this decision?
Oh, many times, yes. But I think that it's such both a professional and a personal challenge and reward that it was impossible for me to say no to such an assignment.
I would like to talk about the topic which is most discussed in recent weeks. Of course, it's about grain dispute. On the one hand is Ukraine, on the other hand countries which we share the border. Our Deputy Minister of Economy said that Ukraine is ready to withdraw its complaint from the World Trade Organization, but instead they would like to receive some guarantees from the EU countries that such restrictions will not repeat in the future. How do you think is it possible to receive such guarantees?
Well, look, as soon as I came last week to Kyiv, I immediately jumped into the issue of grain and the dispute, and I think what I'm very happy is that the situation didn't get more tense, that it didn't escalate, which was very good, and the adoption of the export licensing system that Ukraine put on the table, I believe will create a framework for eliminating any kind of bans and disputes in the future. In fact, as we speak, as we have this interview, there is a meeting of a platform in Brussels where the European Commission facilitates discussion between Ukraine on the one hand and the relevant bordering member states to see how we can really develop the trust in the system that they would not have to impose unilateral bans in the future.
We do understand that Ukraine did actually the right thing because the European Commission lifted the ban, and such countries as Poland, Hungary and Slovakia decided to do it in violation of this decision. But this is the situation when on the one hand Ukraine is right, on the other hand it's spoiling our relationships. So I would like to ask you, what would be the wise solution? I would emphasize on the word the wise solution of this issue. And should European Commission to intervene somehow and resolve it?
Well, look, as I mentioned, the European Commission is intervening in a sense of facilitating the debate. But you ask, what is a wise decision? It's always a balance. There is no question that if the situation would have further escalated, it would have created really unpleasant atmosphere around Ukraine, and we are now looking at the historic prospect of a historic decision in December of opening EU enlargement negotiations. So I think that avoiding any kind of bad impressions is useful, and therefore I am very happy that Ukraine very readily put on the table a solution, and I do believe that also with the facilitation, the help of the Commission, we will be able to really calm the situation and have a solution for the future.
Some Polish and German authorities say that there won't be any Ukrainian membership in the EU before reforms in Ukraine, and also European Union will change something inside, like maybe trade policy, agricultural sphere. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that indeed reforms need to take place on both sides. Ukraine needs to continue its already very impressive reform path, but needs to continue, and reforms will be needed on the EU side. I don't think that specific sectoral policies are the most complicated in the EU. What I think is much more fundamental is the decision-making process and the makeup of the EU institutions, because right now, already at 27, it's a very complex system and very convoluted decision-making processes, and there is a number of areas, for example, foreign policy, EU enlargement, that are subject to individual vetoes of every country, right? Because if you need unanimity, that means every country has a veto. So changing and reforming that is going to be very complicated, because any change requires somebody giving up power, somebody gaining it. So this is, I think, much more complicated and fundamental than a specific sectoral policy, whether trade or agriculture.
Do you mean it is necessary to leave this veto of each country, this unanimity?
I don't think that the veto is the main issue. I think what is the main issue is make the whole decision-making process fit for more countries than 27, because I think already at 27 it's sometimes very complicated to reach the necessary majority, necessary consensus. So I think, yes, there is, especially in areas where you have mostly unanimity, I think that is going to be a little bit more complicated with numbers that are more than the current membership. So these are some of the fundamental issues that will need to be addressed in parallel with Ukraine and Moldova and other countries doing the domestic work that is necessary for joining the European Union.
By the way, about domestic work, our Prime Minister said just a couple of days ago that we implemented almost all recommendations and we are ready for negotiations. How do you think we did our homework with reforms? Are we ready for some good news?
Look, I mean, there is no question that it's very impressive that at the times of a brutal war and Russian aggression following the February of last year invasion and escalation, it's impressive that Ukraine is actually carrying out reforms, and that Rada is sitting and adopting laws, government is fully functioning, the president's office too. I mean, it's really impressive, and as during our bilateral yesterday, President Zelensky mentioned that within a month Ukraine will finalize all the little loose ends that there still are on the 7 recommendations. I think that we are mostly there, but there are still 2 or 3 nuances that need to be finalized.
When do you think we will start these negotiations?
Well, the decision will take place at the December summit of European leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when the decision is expected to take place. Before that will be the recommendation of the European Commission, which will be part of something called enlargement package. There is every year a report on the process of enlargement of the European Union, and the first time this year, this document will contain assessment on Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia. And so there will, before the decision, or in order for the decision to have the basis, will be the enlargement report.
So we need to finish all the reforms before the December, yes?
Well, before the Commission will finalize its report.
Uh-huh.
So I think that what President Zelensky mentioned, a month, I think is just about the right time.
Within October. You are from Slovakia. Your country joined European Union in 2004, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Could you recall what difficulties your country faced with during this transit period? Could you give some advice based on this experience to Ukraine? We're not talking about war, of course,
Yeah.
but...
Well, look, every former communist country that joined the EU or is trying to join the EU has had to go through really a complete transformation of everything, of people's expectations, values, formal rules, laws, informal values and norms. And whether it's the economic ones or political ones, learning how to live in a democratic society where not everybody has the same view, and there are governments, there are oppositions, there are free elections, free press, and these adjustments were not easy. I mean, for many people it was much more comfortable to live in a command system under communism, where you didn't have to think because everything was dictated and provided for you. So the freedom that we achieved in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall created immense opportunities for many, but was also scary for many others. And the institutions that used to have a lot of power had to share it, and it wasn't easy. So any kind of big transformation is very complicated. And we had a specific situation in Slovakia because we were left out from the first round of countries that started negotiating, because we had a non-democratic prime minister and government. And only in the elections of 1998, there was a democratic upswell against the previous government, and we quickly made reforms. That's when I worked in Slovakia with the government, and we started negotiating 2 years later than Poland or Czech Republic or Hungary or the Baltic states, and we joined the EU at the same time. So, in a sense, our accession discussions were 2 years shorter than those of our neighbors. So it was one of the fastest. Accessions. I think the fastest of all the ex-communist countries.
Because you quickly did all the reforms.
Yeah.
How much time did you spend on this?
Well, there were reforms already after the fall of communism. I mean, the reform period was really between 1989 and 2004, but the most eager and fastest way of transforming the country was between 2000 and 2004.
Would you like to say that a lot of people in Slovakia on that period they liked like strong hand leadership would say so. After
Before that, yes. Yes, that's what led to the governments of the ex-prime minister Vladimir Mečiar with his autocratic tendencies and behavior, and so it was a gradual process that ended positively.
The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in its annual address to the European Parliament said that almost 4 million Ukrainian refugees found asylum in the European Union and they are going to continue its protection. But my question is whether all European Union countries ready for such step. Did you notice any fatigue from war? Because this is the second year of war.
Well, look, it's interesting that, of course, there are questions. Is there fatigue? But then, when you look at the recent Eurobarometer results, I think it was 86% of the EU citizens would welcome Ukrainian refugees. There is no really noticeable any kind of either protests, violence, or really big disruptions because of Ukrainian refugees. On the contrary, I think that there are now over 4 million refugees that receive the temporary protection, which actually gives not only residence permits but labor market access, so people can work. They get support in housing and medical care, and kids can go to school. So I think I was very impressed both with the EU, how quickly this was established, and also with my own country that was not really famous for welcoming refugees, that actually people opened their houses and people found work and kids go to school. I think there is over 1,200,000 kids, Ukrainian kids that go to school in the EU. So, in that sense, I don't see any major fatigue.
But what about financial and military aid? We see that hostilities will not stop in the nearest future. Does the European Union is ready to support us? How long does it take?
Well, until now, I think the figure is a little over 80 billion euros that have been raised and provided to Ukraine, both in humanitarian, financial support, military support. I think in military itself, it's upwards of 26 million. And what is quite curious, that the European Union, which was not a military actor before, now has this peace facility, which itself provided and reimbursed member states for over 5 billion euros in arms supplies. So I think there is very much a commitment to stay with Ukraine. Politicians like the expression, as long as it takes. Hopefully it will take less time than not. And I think that the help will continue, but I think it's also really important to understand that there is an expectation, since these are taxpayers' money, that also the reforms will continue, that Ukraine will continue the process of modernization and that it has started.
My next question is about reforms and its impact of implementation of these reforms to our aid. We know that the US government sent Kyiv some list of prioritized reforms for receiving aid. Can we say the same about European Union?
Well, in fact, what we are discussing, what is being legislated on in Brussels, is a package of support of 50 billion euros of financial aid, and also there is a discussion about additional 20 billion for military aid, and that's going through the legislative process. Legislative process means both the member states and the European Parliament discussing it. And a cornerstone of that, it's called the European Facility. And the cornerstone of the European Facility is a plan. It's a reform plan that is being discussed. On the Ukrainian side, it's led by Yulia Sviridenko, Deputy Prime Minister, and it's part of the European Commission where I used to work, that is leading on the EU side. And in fact, I would say even broader set of reforms, because the US plan is about mostly rule of law, anti-corruption matters. But what we are looking at is, of course, rule of law and anti-corruption is absolutely fundamental, but we are discussing reforms also how to achieve growth of the private sector, how to achieve consolidation of the finances, how to achieve macroeconomic stability, how to improve the business environment. So actually what we have as part of the future package, but also existing packages, all of our macro-financial assistance came already with very concrete reforms. So I would even say that this is a natural way. We have always had this very productive relationship with the authorities, where we nudge in a certain direction, and it's a plan that is fully owned by Ukraine, and is helping to go in a direction that you yourself want to go.
I would like to talk more about sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
Bloomberg Media wrote that we are expecting the 12th in a row, if I'm not mistaken, package of Russian sanctions this October. Could you reveal which restrictions are on the table and whether we should expect unity from the European Union countries? Because we've seen like countries like Hungary, sometimes they are blocking some points from this list of sanctions.
Well, let me answer in the order that you posed the question. Putting together a sanction package is such a sensitive exercise, and it is calibrated till the last moment of not voting on it, because you don't vote, you reach unanimity. So many consultations that it would really be very premature to talk about it now. Yes, I confirm that any future sanctions package will be the 12th one, because we have already adopted 11 packages of sanctions. And in fact, it's not only the European Union. There are about 40 countries in the world, the US, Canada, UK, etc., and many others that adopted sanctions against Russia. Now, you're asking about unanimity. By definition, sanctions are unanimous, and so sure, there are debates, there are different views, there are different economic interests, there are different needs of different countries, so there is always a debate, but the fact that we have been able to adopt 11 packages of sanctions means that we always reach unanimity. Otherwise, you couldn't have a sanctions package. And I think that in general, one of the most amazing byproducts of a terrible, terrible war is actually how it unified the European Union. And the fact that things that were unimaginable before February 2022 actually happened, whether sanctions on Russia, whether granting candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova. I mean, it really brought EU together. I would even say the Western community. And I think this was one of the biggest miscalculations of President Putin, that he wanted to sow doubt, wanted to sow discord, wanted to break and divide the EU and the West, and he did not succeed in that.
Did it make quicker European bureaucracy?
Absolutely. It definitely made quicker European bureaucracy. I would even say, I worked in the Commission and was in charge of Ukraine when invasion happened, and it was already the day on the 24th of February and 25th of February when we were in touch with our grantees, with our contractors, with our partners, and they were immediately reallocating the resources from us to buy protective equipment, water, food, shelter, tents, and I think that the feedback we got was that we really reacted actually as one of the first donors on the ground.
There is going to be a historic event next week. Our foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba this morning wrote that this is gonna be a first ever meeting of European Union ministers outside the European Union, actually here in Kyiv. What we are going to expect from this meeting?
Well, I for us at the EU delegation, it's a logistical nightmare because organizing so many VIPs in town is of course challenging for my colleagues, and my big thanks go to them and also to the Ukrainian authorities and for the security assistance they are offering, logistical assistance, because it is a big event during a war to have a meeting of ministers of foreign affairs in Kyiv. But joking aside, I think it's politically really an important message of solidarity with Ukraine, and it's a message both to Ukrainians but also the domestic population, right? That a group of ministers comes here and feels comfortable to discuss issues together with Dmytro Kuleba and counterparts. We are hoping also to have meetings with other representatives. And there is going to be discussion about President Zelensky's peace formula, about further debate about security guarantees and many other issues that ministers typically discuss when it comes to Ukraine.
With my last question, I would like to come back to your appointment. You came to a country which actually in brutal war with Russia, with a lot of deaths, with a lot of injured people, but still this country is paving its way to European family. What tasks do you set for yourself in the next 4 years in this country?
Well, I sort of have a dual purpose of helping and coordinating also the work of member states representative to do whatever we can to help Ukraine win the war, and also to help on its EU path. That means accompanying Ukraine on the reforms, trying to maybe do the cultural interpretation between what's happening in Brussels, which is sometimes not that easy to decipher, and also I would say also very much reaching out to Ukrainians, to ordinary Ukrainians, work with the civil society, with the business community, as much as I will be able to, for security reasons, travel around the country. And there is one particular topic that I would very much like to help on and discuss, and that's the whole issue of mental health and trauma, because being in a war, even if it's not an acute war, for example, like in Kyiv, it really traumatizes, whether it's kids, whether it's adults, whether it's war veterans, whether it's older people. And I think that this is something that one needs to talk about and look for ways how to provide assistance to those that need it.
Madam Ambassador, I would like to thank you for this interview. I think it was a good conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Дуже дякую.
Дуже дякую.